All right, thank you so much for still being with us here at Morning at NTV, streaming live on our website, www.ntv.co.uk. Equally on Facebook, you can definitely find the live stream. Your comments are also most welcome on the hashtag Morning at NTV. I am Priscilla Nalwoga. Our first conversation of the day is looking at political cartoons and their enduring power. Satire and humor in political cartoons is what is going to be our focal point. Now, the cartoons and more of those sketches that you have seen around, especially from the names as the one that we do have in studio, sketched in the face of significant local and international events, give us a contemporary insight into past times and as well as the current times, especially when it comes to current affairs in our country. Now, the cartoonist uses the resources of caricature to reveal how politicians were or are viewed and understood by the public. Through satire and sketching content, it is possible to understand how people respond to and engage with political events as well as movements or decisions for that matter, or democracy, depending on the tide and the season. Now, for historians, the analysis of historical political cartooning is important because of the way in which understanding of the visual in the past actually comes to significantly affect other areas. Now, today we get to speak to one of the famous cartoonists here in Uganda, and we want to understand the craft of this business and what impact it has had to society, but also to the leadership of society, stemming different areas of our issues that concern us, from public service to human rights to democracy, name it all. He's an award-winning professor, author, human rights defender, and a cartoonist. His name is Jimmy Spire Ssentongo. Professor, you're most welcome and good morning.
Thank you, and thanks for having me.
All right. Now, let's get into the nitty-gritty of it. While your cartoons can be very funny, we look forward to them all the time. They kind of translate for us what we're thinking about the situations in our country. And they're primarily created to persuade us as an audience to actually take a particular view onto the event of the day. But we need to first understand what is a political cartoon and how is it different from the other cartoons out there?
I think basically a political cartoon is one that comments about political events that either tries to satirize or to make a certain argument or to direct debate in the public, but basically about political events. Other cartoons, I would say that there would be cartoons about almost anything. So it is just the subject that determines where we would place it. It can be religious, it can be about sport, about music, and even cartoons that are basically entertainment without really any intention to communicate anything, just to make fun. Yeah.
Okay. Since the 16th century, we have seen evolution of cartoonists. I think the first one that we can all agree to is the Martin Luther cartoon of the Clapper's Chronics, depicting the Pope and his knights and urinating against the Protestant. Since then, what has been the evolution and the power of political cartooning?
So many directions. I don't know even how I could summarize that, because cartoons have taken different shapes in different contexts, because usually it's the nature of the thing that you're dealing with, but also your environment, the political environment, sometimes religious environment, that determines what cartoonists do or choose not to do. In certain places, cartoons have quite advanced because of the liberties they've had over time, where democracies grew fast. You would also find that generally expression has found expression, and also that cartoonists thrive even better than in other places. So in the history, the few things that I could note is that in Europe you see a faster development in cartoons than you find elsewhere, maybe even later America. Africa, we had, from the little that I can tell, we've had our own forms of humor, but they were not mostly scripted in terms of drawings, except in cases where you'd find drawings on stones. We've seen rock paintings, some of which are really funny. You would say that they are cartoons of a sort. But to bring it to the context of politics, I don't think it has been so many years here in Africa, also because of the nature of the political setup that we had here, where you had monarchies. I don't think monarchies are the kind, even if we have developed the technologies to write, monarchies are not the kind that you can push back to with cartoons. The consequences would be dire. So that could be partly the reason, but also because the technologies, especially in sub-Saharan Africa, have taken time to really develop.
Okay, and then what role has political cartooning actually played in the modern day governance and democracy of Africa?
Yeah, what we generally know about cartoons is how they try to push back and how they try to extend boundaries of expression. Because usually in many societies where cartoons are used to communicate, it's about those topics that many others would fear to talk about, taboo subjects, if you might call them. But it's also about those things that, given their sensitivity, you cannot address them directly. I can comment about religious matters, I can comment about political matters, I can comment about cultural matters, including some that I cannot write about. I'm both a writer and a cartoonist, but there are certain things I would rather address with cartoons, but not in writing, because of the permissions that the cartoon comes with. First, usually the audience is quite eager to laugh. The audience is quite eager to look for the humorous side of the cartoon. And that facilitates the cartoon to communicate something often veiled or sometimes direct, that as this person is looking for a source of laughter, within that laughter, that's where you package the message. And humor has been a very important part of our society, of our socialization. In Africa, I often say we joke about almost anything. And this has been a tradition for long. Be it at a funeral, people will be cracking jokes. There will be a drunkard who is singing and throwing words here and there. Be it at even the most sorrowful of events, there will be humor, there will be jokes. So because we love jokes, the political cartoon becomes a very strong tool. That you're communicating through something that is almost immediately catchy, except if you fail to get the humor. I've seen people who have for long not really been interested in politics. They'll come and tell you, for me, politics, no. But they'll tell you that because of cartoons, they have started developing some interest. They just came to laugh, but eventually they picked the interest.
Okay,
Yeah.
You talked about some events you leave to cartooning, then writing about them, and some societal issues. What are those particular ones that you've said, okay, these ones, I'm most safe releasing them or addressing them to the public through cartooning?
Yeah, there are some personalities that, for one reason or the other, we will know in society that so-and-so is quite, I don't know the exact word to use, but there are people you don't easily criticize for known reasons, or maybe for just what society has come to believe. So there are certain individuals that I'll critique through cartoons, but I might not write about. Partly the reason is not just for the humor, but when I draw, for instance, your cartoon, I'll not put a name, except if I fail to bring out the features that will help someone, will facilitate someone to know that this is Priscilla. But the public will be able to know who it is. So you cannot accuse me of anything, even if it looks like you. I said, well, it's just by coincidence, but I was not drawing you. So it gives you some cover that if one was to use legal means, and because I know sometimes they can even get at you without going through legal channels. But if one was to follow the law, as usually our government would want to do, because they don't want to seem arbitrary, it would be very difficult to catch a cartoonist. So for those individuals, a few individuals, not so many actually, about 3, I would prefer to use cartoons. Yeah, both because of the security, the safety that the cartoons would give me, but also to disarm them. To disarm them, because when you start fighting with a cartoonist, everyone will say, okay, but have we gotten to that level that you're fighting with a cartoonist? Of course, the cartoonist is serious, but he presents himself as though he is unserious, such that fighting him makes you look odd. It makes you look unserious. So that's how it becomes easy to address sensitive topics, but also individuals that are known to be a no-go area.
Okay, you talked about cartooning giving you permissions. You mentioned security and safety and the legalities. Any other permissions that you've been privileged with through this form of expression?
Maybe in terms of access to the public. You know, when I write, I'm mainly addressing myself to those who can read. Even when I speak, I'm addressing myself to those who can understand the language that I use. So if they cannot understand English, I've excluded them. Or if they cannot understand Uganda, whichever other language that I use, it means we cannot communicate. The language of cartoons pushes boundaries. For as long as one has the sensibility to think and they understand the context of the cartoon, they will always be able to pick something, at least part of the message. There are cartoons that will not have any words on them, just drawings, meaning that even a child who is following or who is aware of the event being depicted will just look at the images, try to relate and understand. Even if they are coming from Europe or from Australia, for as long as they can reason, they would be able to understand relating to the context. So that means that a cartoon has more public access than many other means of communication. I've gone to the village, deep in the village where I come from in Masaka, and you find someone telling you about your cartoon, someone you don't really think went far in school, but they tell you, I really loved this cartoon about this. Being an academic, I'm quite sensitive about the means that I use, the means of communication, because in academia, one of the critics that we have had for long is the way we write. Many people express reservations that we write as if we are not interested in expanding the scope of our readership. You are addressing a small circle of maybe people within your field or experts. You use a language that is full of jargon that can only be understood by a few. But ultimately, when you think about all this, you ask yourself, what am I writing for? When I write a book, my desire would be that it's read by as many people as possible. Yeah. When I write a journal article, it's the same desire, but quite often you write a journal article and you check after some time on the website, it has been read by about 50 people. And colleagues tell you that 50 is too good, or 100, that's really good. Yet with a cartoon, of course there are things that journal articles and books can do which cartoons cannot. But in terms of reaching out to the public, I will tweet a cartoon, I'll post a cartoon on Facebook. Just within an hour, it has 3,000 likes, or at least I can tell that about 3,000 people have viewed it. So the number of people that I reach with a cartoon is far more than those that I can reach with my journal article. One would say that they serve different purposes, but even then, I think everyone who desires to communicate should wish to see that their message reaches the audience, or that we expand the boundaries of our audience as much as we can.
All right, speaking of messages, which seasons of democracy and governance have been most appreciated through your political cartooning?
It's usually the periods of elections, because that's where the political hype is quite high. That's where many people are following politics, including those who have not been interested for long. Yeah, so that's, and it also happens to be the craziest time.
Yeah.
So the jokes, the terrible things, violence, because for us cartoonists, all that is material to work with. Even if it is violence, you find a way of going around it that might make people laugh about it, but communicating a message, not really that it's just laughter. So it's usually elections that we consider to be our political field day.
Yeah, Jimmy, you in particular, you know, touch up to the toppest of things and people in this country, and I know that it must come at a risk. What are some of the risks that you've had to deal with?
The risks are always there because naturally many of us wouldn't want to be made fun of. Many of us wouldn't want to be ridiculed. Many of us wouldn't want to be lampooned, or we wouldn't want people to laugh at us. Yet that is the trade of cartoonists. The best cartoon is that would get people laughing on top of the message. So you would naturally expect that if you're going to make people laugh about or laugh at a politician, that politician is not going to be happy. Some people will say, but then why do you do it? That is not good. If it's going to make someone uncomfortable. As I said, it's often for a message. I don't offend for the sake of it. I offend for a purpose. And usually, as I often say, cartoons are one of the weapons of the weak. It's because I cannot reach certain people, the powerful, that I will use cartoons to reach them, to make fun of them. Yeah, so that will come at a cost. One, you know, you can always be harmed by those that you make uncomfortable. Sometimes you will receive threats, although in my cartooning work specifically, leave alone the wider activism, I haven't really been threatened because of cartoons. I know some people have been uncomfortable, they've complained, but not really anyone coming to me, maybe threatening, or it hasn't happened. But I know it is something that we live with. It can happen anytime. We've seen it happen in some countries. We saw what happened in France, the Charlie Hebdo event. We saw the Denmark issues. So we have to be ready for it anytime. But it's something that you bear, or a cross that you accept to carry for the sake of what you want to deliver. Okay,
let's talk about it as a tool, especially in your other line of works, such as human rights defending. How has it contributed to that?
Partly what I talked about earlier, that it reaches so many people, first of all. Second, that it disarms. It disarms this person who comes with weapons or who expects to use violence. It's not easy to fight cartoonists, so it's not easy to push back towards someone who is simply telling you something but through funny means. So when I comment about human rights issues or organ comments about an issue, first of all, the cartoon will spread far and wide. Second, it facilitates conversation, it facilitates debate, because one of the things that we do with cartoons is to trigger the public or to tickle them. At times, an issue has been forgotten, a topic has been forgotten. We talked about it a few weeks back now, because the nature of our politics is that there is always so much. We are overwhelmed by scandals, we are overwhelmed by outrageous things. So people quickly move on. We've somehow learned to adopt to that situation by laughing about things, and we move on. Before you know it, it has been forgotten and not addressed. But as a cartoonist, you can always bring back the public. Look, we are discussing Parliament, but there is still this issue that happened a few weeks ago.
We're meant to be doing the merging, you know, focusing on that, but there's diversion of
so even in trying to address the diversions that happen when a story is just thrown in, or an event just to distract you, you might wait a little bit, but draw a cartoon and you see that people come back and start discussing. If you see that they have not discussed enough, follow up on the same issue. That's why you might see that at some instances, about just one issue, I draw maybe up to 3 cartoons following each other, because I don't want the debate to stop. So I think that is one of the strong ways in which cartoons facilitate human rights related activism, in making sure that issues are addressed by making them discussed, but also by making the responsible people uncomfortable. If you see that cartoonists are on your case drawing one cartoon after the other, you would want to address the issue that is attracting their rage towards you. And quite often we have seen that at least there is a response. And cartoons are not very easy to avoid. That's the other strength. Maybe an article can be avoided. When I write a long newspaper article, it can be forwarded to the person I'm addressing, and they just look at it and choose to put it on the side without reading. But with cartoons, it's very difficult. The moment you see something, an image that looks like you, you would want to see, to know what is this person saying. So it ends up, the message reaches the targets that you would want it to reach. Although I'm not trying to say that the message is always for that target. Sometimes a cartoon is about Priscilla, but it is meant for the audience. Let Ugandans laugh at Priscilla, and then Priscilla does something. So even if Priscilla chooses not to look at the cartoon, the public will force you to do something.
Yes. Yeah. How has that contributed to better governance and maybe public service delivery in Uganda?
I may not cite particular instances where it has done so. I believe that in the so many methods that we use, some going to court, some going to the streets, some petitioning, each of these approaches have a contribution. So I might not say as a cartoonist that it's particularly because of my cartoon that this happened. Maybe there are so many other confounding factors, there are so many other forces that are contributing to the outcome. But I can only say that cartoons have been part of that. If someone is petitioning, but on top of that I'm adding pressure of cartoons, of the public is laughing at you, or you're being ridiculed, I would say that all that adds to the picture that we might see, to the outcome.
Okay, so we have looked at the influence and the impact of cartooning, but what are the components when you sit down with your pencil or pen, whichever you use? What are the components that you have to consider when you're constituting a political cartoon or one for editorial purposes? One,
as a cartoonist, you have to be very keen at following events. If it's political events, you have to know what is happening. Of course, being an academic, that takes a lot of my time. I cannot really follow news all the time, but what helps us these days is social media. So I'll just go there, scroll through certain accounts that I know to be reporting news, especially political, check NTV, other TV accounts, check radio accounts. Then I get a sense of what is happening. Second is to think about how you're going to execute it. And that takes much more time than the actual drawing. Actually, the drawing is more like downloading what I already have on my mind. So I have to take time to think through it, especially packaging it around what interests us in society, what we find funny. So I could, for instance, pick from a folktale that I imagine everyone knows. I get that folktale, bring it into a political event, then everyone is able to know, oh, okay, it's about this, this, and this. Or I could pick from a song of late everyone has been singing, Ozambe, that song of, what's the title? Yeah, that Ozambe song. You could have seen a cartoon by Ogon of the president carrying the speaker on his lap, and they are singing that, that song. So some people will come in just to laugh, or because they know Ozambe, but Ozambe is being used to say something different, not just the music. So that process of thinking through all that is what takes time. Actually, you cannot be a cartoonist if you're not critical. You cannot be a cartoonist if you don't have ability to analyze or to think through things, and so many angles of consideration. One, as I think through what is going to be funny, or as I think through the best way of execution, I'm also thinking through the structure of our society. I'm thinking through our cultures, our religion, being careful not to offend those that I don't intend to offend. Some cartoons will, some ideas will seem to be funny, but you quickly realize that this is going to offend Muslims, this is going to offend Christians, or this is going to offend people of a particular ethnic group. Then you abandon that line. So you think in so many lines, not just this is funny, I'm going to execute it directly like that. Then the other thing is that you try to think through the different strata of society, depending on the audience. But for me, usually I want my audience to be as wide as possible. So I think through about younger people. I'll think about those in the middle age category, old people. How will they receive this cartoon? What will come to their mind when they reflect about this particular angle of the cartoon? And the other thing is that over time you develop symbols, both to make your work easy, but also to bring the public to quickly understand whenever they see something. For instance, the symbol of the bottle that I often use. Everyone who has been following events in Uganda, who has been seeing my cartoons for some time, will look at the bottle and will immediately know, okay, that represents so and so. That means that there is an influence of so and so in that particular image. Then lastly, it would be the actual execution, the drawing, which, as I said, doesn't really take much time. Except if a cartoon is very complex with so many figures. But if you have practiced for some time the drawing, I should say that it is the easiest part of the cartoon. Those seeing the cartoons often think that it's the drawing that is hard, but it's the thinking behind it. In fact, sometimes you spend an entire day thinking about a cartoon.
Conceptualizing it.
Yeah. Only that you don't sit down to think. As you're doing other things, the idea keeps coming and going. Sometimes an idea pops in like an epiphany and it's quite clear. Those are rare, but they are usually the best cartoons. Just appears with every detail, every angle well captured, and then you just draw and do some editing on computer. That's it. Okay.
How is it that cartoons have remained a timeless method of political commentary?
Yeah, it's because of the power of reaching wide audiences, as I've said, but also because of the humorous element that speaks to the human condition and the human nature of desiring to laugh, but also to the desire to lighten moments. There are some moments that are quite heavy, too heavy to be discussed in a serious manner. There are some things that are too serious and at times too hurtful that you cannot confront them directly. And society is, maybe specifically, let me speak about our society. We are grappling with so many pains. You have the pain of roads, you have the pain of hospitals, you have the pain of poor schools. So these pains need therapy. So the cartoons are also therapeutic. They help us relieve the things that we cannot ordinarily bear. as I've often said, that if we did not find a way of laughing about certain things in Uganda, they would have killed us.
True.
Yeah, but when you laugh, yeah, somehow that passes. The scandals that we have been having day in, day out. So when you hear that someone has stolen billions, or someone has been found with billions of money under the bed, despite the conditions of hospitals, how do you respond to that? You get overwhelmed, and at times you simply laugh. I don't know whether you've seen at funerals at times that the bereaved just get too overwhelmed that they start laughing. No one has made any joke, but the widow is laughing. It means they have been overpowered by the emotion of grief. So I think somehow we are also like that in Uganda. We reach some points and we are totally helpless. There is nothing you can do. You know that as you're discussing this scandal, another is coming. Say, okay, let's find a way of laughing about these things. Otherwise, we are going to die very soon. They are going to kill us.
Now, speaking of laughing, as we will laugh at your work while getting the message at the same time, which 3 cartoons have made you laugh?
My own or?
Your own?
I can't immediately think of. I don't think I have any in mind.
Okay, as you're getting your own, the others with your other colleagues?
Yeah, the others, the cartoon I've just talked about of Ogon, of the president carrying the speaker. There are quite many. They just can't come to mind immediately because I really love Ogon's cartoons. I like his detail. I like the extent of his creativity. So sometimes with my own cartoons, by the time I'm done drawing, I'm bored. Just like a meal you prepare yourself. By the time you finish cooking, maybe you have lost the appetite. Yeah, but whenever I see cartoons of other people outside Uganda, cartoons by Zapiro from South Africa, by Gado, I really find them impressive. Yeah. Well,
page 14 of the Daily Monitor, the cartoon of the day is about Onana, the Manchester United goalkeeper that was in town earlier on in the week. And so you do have the president with a gun, and then next to him is someone who's meant to be the secretary or a presidential advisor, and who's telling him it's a party of it's a party procession for Onana, and he's like, Onana sounds foreign funded. What are they protesting? We need to deal with these protesters. Okay, all right. So when all is done and dusted, this is still a profession and a form of expression that ought to be continuous. It begs the question, in this line of work, how are you pouring and mentoring others to be able to walk in the same shoes that you're walking in?
When different cartoonists tell you how they come to the scene, one thing you realize is that there isn't much mentorship in Uganda, especially mentorship specifically on cartoons. At universities, you'll find they teach illustration, but not specifically cartooning or political cartooning or teaching how to use humor to communicate. That could be taught in literature, but in fine art, where you would most likely find cartoonists, it's not really taught. So the cartoonists that I know, for instance, in Uganda, Ogon studied fine art, studied illustration, but he also tells you that he did not, he wasn't taught cartooning or animation. I know Russ also studied fine art, but he did not really study cartooning. I don't know whether it's because we've not yet taken it very seriously, despite the fact that we acknowledge it's quite powerful in communication, but why we don't teach it in school, I don't really know. The other line would be us mentoring others. I often try to reach out to younger cartoonists. Some reach out to me. There are those that I've been working with at times. They send you their work, try to critique, try to advise them. on things that they could improve, and usually it's about the humor. You know, some people are very good at drawing, but the humor is not there. They tell you, I really want to be a cartoonist, and you see they are very good artists. But when you look at what they draw, you don't really find anything funny. And once you don't have that aspect, it becomes hard, or maybe you will need someone to write the humor for you, to script you.
Absolutely. Because that's what I was going to ask. Is the humor meant to be a naturally given element to the cartoonist for it to actually come out?
It's usually better when it naturally comes out of you. It's better. It's not really fun to draw things that you have been told to draw. I think even in music, the best musicians are those that write their own songs. They can really feel them. It comes from a certain place in one's mind. But for those who are really talented, we try. There is a project I've written. It's not yet really come to execution stage, which is basically about mentoring young cartoonists, specifically on cartooning for activism, cartooning for human rights defense or advocacy, because I realize that there is a big gap. Today we have in Uganda about 3 or maybe 4, I can only think about 4 or 5 cartoonists in Uganda. Now in a country with a population of 46 million, to only have about 6 cartoonists, that should be alarming.
That are in the same age category at that.
Yeah, because there are countries you go to and you can't count the cartoonists. Even just within the region, in Tanzania, there are so many cartoonists. In Kenya, so many cartoonists. Come to Uganda, just a handful. And even that handful is often frustrated because even the media houses they work with, they appreciate their work, but the remuneration is quite poor. I'm helped by the fact that it's not my full-time source of income, not my livelihood. So I can continue drawing even when I don't gain anything from it. But I really sympathize with those cartoonists that work with media houses. That's your full-time job. And you ask them about the money they are paid, you see the level of talent and the payment, and you just feel like this one is also soon abandoning it. I know some have left for Cheo. Even those who are practicing, there are many who will tell you, no, I don't see myself continuing doing this, because generally our society doesn't attach value, especially monetary value, to art, to fine art. But when it comes to cartoons, I think it's even worse. You only find a few people who appreciate. So that becomes a disincentive that even the ones you mentor, you're not quite sure they are going to stay. Soon they'll start families, they need to survive, and you find, they say, I want to study something else. I don't think I can survive on cartoons. So we have a lot to do about it.
All right. What other opportunities lie within, away from having to work with a media house, an established media house, to get your work out there? What are the other elements, or what are the other opportunities that could be directly or indirectly attached to this line of work?
Yeah, there is so much that a cartoonist can do. Actually, sometimes while you'll put the blame on media houses, it's also about our own innovation. Sometimes we lament, yet we could do much better with our talents. Cartoonists could do illustration, because there are so many people demanding for illustration, so many companies, so many books being published that would need illustration, children's books and magazines. That is one of the area. Although what often happens is that when you're fully employed by a media house, they make you too busy that you can't even think about anything else. You can't get any time there. They're always demanding, draw for this, draw for that. I've not lived through that, but I often talk to other cartoonists. So before you know it, you're aging and you really haven't done anything. It's just looking up to the salary. But if it wasn't for that, there are so many other opportunities. One can even join animation, although it's a field that many of us are hesitant going to. It comes with a lot of work. But I know a few who are established in animation, really making good money. Yeah, so it's generally about one's innovation, one's creativity. But all that said, it is very important for society to treasure and to invest in people that they have seen to be having exceptional talent. And I'll come back to Ogon still. I often tell Ogon that if he lived in a very serious country, he would have been extremely far. He wouldn't be where he is, because you see the level of talent and you feel like even this is going to end up being wasted. And by wasted, I mean if he eventually ventures into other things out of maybe frustration. So we have a big gap there, not only in art, but you see even in other fields, that people who are talented, extremely talented, struggle. These are people that we should have invested a lot in, even for the development of the country. That is how some countries have developed. But for us here, with our nepotism, tribalism, you would rather pick someone who doesn't have as much talent, who is not as gifted, or someone who is totally clueless, and you leave the talented person who has no connection. I think that has killed a lot of talent, and it hampers our development. So much as we'll talk about cartoonists looking for opportunities, but I think there also have to be deliberate initiatives, let's say by government, to look out for these people. Not only talented cartoonists, but people who are talented in other fields and trying to boost them. I've seen there is some support being given to musicians, but even then, you notice that it's
and petition kind of support.
And you notice it's mostly political, for the politics, not really in the spirit of building talent, in the spirit of boosting our people, so that they also become internationally visible and they carry the flag of the country out there. But ultimately, you'll find there is one cartoonist who used to draw for New Vision, Snogi. Now he's in the US, and maybe it's there that they are appreciated and they come back here as celebrities and we almost worship them. When we were watching them as they were grassing here, I read, I helped some young man who wrote a biography of File. But reading the story of File Rutaya, you really get a feeling that, first of all, he was discovered so late, the country knew him so late, although he was still a young man. Somewhere he says that it is unfortunate that in my own country I was not really treasured at the beginning, and I was not helped to grow, that I had to trek all that journey to go to Sweden for me to be able to be established and come back to Uganda as a celebrity. And he says that I feel a lot of time was wasted in the process. At some point he had to travel as far as DRC in order to link up with bands up in DRC to learn instrumentation and all that, and then some stint in Kenya, ultimately in Sweden. And then when he comes back to Uganda, when he's at almost international status, he's dying. So he says one of the things that he regrets is that he discovered him, or he established himself a bit late, because he didn't really get enough help. The environment to facilitate him. And it's a story of many.
Yes. All right, having a conversation around political cartoons and their enduring power, the satire and humor in political cartooning, the influence that it's had, what it takes to actually develop this as a technique and also as a mode of communication for societal's plight. You do have it from governance to human rights defense to service delivery. Mention many and a few. We do have Jimmy Spire Ssentongo that we've been talking to, and just before the break we were talking about the profession by and large and how it is appreciated or depreciated here within the region, more focal on Uganda, and of course the plight is serious. Many of them that are gifted, and they're not many, accounting for about 6 of them, in their gifting not really being appreciated by those that they work with and by society by and large, and yet there's enormous opportunity, especially in such a day and era that is technological forward, AI and things like that, and other communities that are most appreciative of cartooning as a form of expression and moving the agenda forward. It begs the question, what is the future of cartooning in Uganda if this is where our friends and our colleague are in heart and spirit?
Yeah, the future, I can't talk with certainty about how it would be, because that is the nature of the future that we can always predict, but still there is room for shocks, for surprises. But judging from what is happening, you see, the good thing is that despite of all these challenges, cartooning or art in general comes out of passion. So even with those challenges, and that's why artists are easily exploited.
Yeah.
It's because the passion keeps driving them, such that at times, especially earlier in those days where, for instance, a cartoon could only find expression or find visibility if you are attached to a media house, you would even be ready to draw it free of charge just to get that access. There is that zeal, there is that thing. It's like a ghost that possesses you. You always, you've seen artists always drawing, even in a meeting when they are bored, they are drawing something. So it is a push that doesn't leave you alone. And because it never leaves you alone, you're willing, even in hardships, even in where some people would give up if they were only doing it for money. Cartoonists will often, or artists in general, they will often try to persevere. So I really hope, and from what I'm seeing, that there are many younger people who are approaching me, many young people who are talking to other cartoonists, that they will join, and their own passion is going to drive them. The good thing is that they are coming in at a time when there are more opportunities. When I started cartooning, which was 2006, I mean political cartooning for papers, it was hard. You could only, as I said, you could only publish yourself through a paper. So I was published by the Observer. If I didn't publish in the Observer, there are so many cartoons that I drew and simply kept. So I had papers and papers stacked somewhere, but I couldn't share them. Today, you're your own publisher, you're your own editor, you just draw a cartoon, put it on your X handle, and it's already circulating. I've seen cartoons which have gone viral of artists that might not even be known by anyone, of cartoonists who are not attached to any media house. So I think that is a particular strength or a particular advantage that we have today. I was talking to a young animator 2 days ago, and that's precisely what I was telling him, because he was asking me about opportunities to share his animation through Agora, and I told him, yeah, that would really be a good thing. You might not be paid if Agora doesn't have the budget for that, but you get to be seen, and before you know it, someone will be looking for you.
Right.
Yeah, but what I saw in him is that zeal, is the desire to keep doing what he's doing. He has been making, he's called Jimmy, he has been making a number of animations, short animations, which you could have seen. So that is what gives me the hope. I talked about only about 5 cartoonists, but there are so many young ones that would wish to join. Now, if on top of the passion they have, we can also have our institutions appreciating it more, the art schools, so that this is mainstreamed within the teaching of art, although I know that in art it's mostly a talent that you can develop even when you're not taught, but sometimes the teaching sharpens a bit. Personally, I never got that opportunity of studying illustration or cartooning or anything. But maybe not everyone is going to have the drive like I did, so art schools should consider taking this seriously. The short time that I studied art in senior 4, second and third term, I don't remember anything to do with cartoons being mentioned, nowhere at all. So you would have still life, you had nature, you had imaginative composition, maybe that's where it would feel, but even in imaginative composition, you imagine realistically. You're going to draw a human being as a human being. If you're told, imagine maybe people fighting, it has to be people fighting, not cartoons or people fighting.
As a senior in this industry, what is your call to action as we conclude this conversation to the different stakeholders?
Sorry?
What's your call to action to the different stakeholders to support the growth of the industry?
Yeah, one is to appreciate our cartoonists more, not just in terms of loving their work. I know that is already there. But it's not really a good thing to have broke celebrities, a broke celebrity cartoonist. So media houses, those that employ cartoonists, I might not be in that category, but for the love of it, I would really urge media houses to value the work of cartoonists. You only have 1 or 2 cartoonists in your paper. I think these cartoonists can also have a decent, there are media houses where I know the top boss is in millions and millions. Those ones who are below, and this is worse actually in media houses, because I've heard so many stories coming out of there. The foot soldiers, if I might use that word, those who toil in the field, who toil having to think all the time, imagine, they go home with peanuts. So I think media houses should be more appreciative of such talent to enable it to grow, but also to inspire others, because I don't think it would be a good thing to find that some of these people tomorrow are leaving the country to go to Ducheo or something else. So that is one way, but also government, through its initiatives that could be broad, maybe in curriculum development, emphasizing such things creatively through, we have now this new curriculum, the competence-based curriculum. It's one of the things that could be emphasized, although I heard that art is being de-emphasized. But we need to think through it more.
All right, Jimmy Spire Ssentongo, thank you so much for inspiring communities and society in striving to ensure that some of the key issues that affect society are addressed.